tell me how things were with this that we talked about.
All right, yeah, so last time you were teaching me to clench my fist because when I'm in conversation with somebody, something comes up in my mind that I want to talk about, but you can't just interrupt someone in mid-conversation. So I was asking you, how can I, because what happens to me is I try to remember what I want to talk about while I'm trying to take in what the person's talking to me at the same time, and I end up not retaining either. It all disappears. So it's a bit of a problem. So you were saying do a fist and like hold the idea in the fist. But this is what I thought about that. Okay, so my first thought is I don't want to just be doing this when I'm talking to someone, right? Like it seems a bit aggressive. Like
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Cheers.
I think it seems a bit aggressive. Like they might, because you might subconsciously see that I'm holding, that I've suddenly made a fist.
Right.
Like I'm unhappy about something.
Okay.
So I was thinking, what about doing fingers crossed?
That's very iconic for memory.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah.
Right, and I was thinking, because you could not just do one finger crossed, you could do two fingers crossed.
Right.
So you could have two separate things going, I don't know.
Cool.
But, so that was what I wanted to say, so, and I've tried it and it works, man.
Really?
Yeah.
Does an example come to mind that you can share? PG-13?
Well, I did it when I was talking to you straight after you told me.
Right,
In the same conversation, I did the fist and it worked.
Yeah.
And then I did it recently with someone, but I can't remember. I remembered at the time, it worked at the time, but now it's gone. So.
We should have had a simultaneous sip.
Yeah.
You ever see that on the simultaneous sip?
weird silent moment.
Yeah. Cool. So that worked out. Yeah, I mean, it's just a way of making sure other stimulation in the environment doesn't start to take over your cognitive demands and push things out of place.
Yeah.
So great.
But yeah, so I don't really know exactly how it works. Having the idea and picturing my fist and that idea at the same time, and then I can forget about it, let it go. I think you were saying just the act of like relaxing your mind, just knowing that the thought is caught there.
Yeah.
Relaxing your mind rather than tensing up, going, I've got to remember.
Right.
Just, yeah.
Yeah, it's like giving it a place to go, literally, and encoding it in space. So,
yeah, but somehow associating it with a physical object, like.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there's lots you can do.
Right.
Lots you can do. So I was talking with Brad Zupp this morning, who's a memory author and competitor, and if I remember correctly, he was telling me that his image for the Ace of Clubs is a white cat, and he was talking, I don't know that he always uses this example, but as he was talking about this morning, the white cat was doing a backflip near a purple canoe. Right? And the reason why I know this is because I was interviewing him and I was paying attention to him, and I just sort of wanted to hold on to that. So then I used my image for the Ace of Clubs.
Yeah, which is what?
It's it's Alan Ladd with a latte. Okay. So I'm not drinking a latte right now, but you know what a latte is?
Yeah.
Coffee. And there's a reason why it's
coffee and milk.
It's the reason why it's LAT words, because the cards are all numbered, and I use the major method.
This all comes back to the major method, right?
Right. But in any case, he seems not to use that for his cards. But nonetheless, I placed it in space because I wanted to come back to it in our conversation, right? And I didn't hold on my body or anything like this, but I did tap my knee just quite, and I placed it in a memory palace at the same time.
Okay.
Right? So it's, now I don't know that tapping the knee is some super magical memory technique, but it's like, there's a theory of anchoring, it's called, where you can do that kind of stuff. And I found it effective, even if it's a bit self-delusional, that should work. I've done it a lot during my life, even with when you feel really good, like I've just touched my leg, and then when I want to feel really good again, touch my leg again.
And you bring back that sensation.
Because it's somehow anchored. They use that word anchoring. So
cool.
Yeah, something to think about.
I'll do that next time I'm really happy. Tap my knee.
Yeah. Well, you just did it while you were happy.
Yeah, man.
So you must not get lewd about it.
What's the dancing where you tap your legs and
I don't know, but
they must be real happy.
Singing in the rain. Singing in the rain. You ever see that movie?
No.
Well, they have a whole routine with
But my best friend, Tim, he's quite a fan of that movie, so maybe one day I'll get him to watch it with me.
Yeah, well, maybe they'll play it at the theater. They were playing, oh man, what the heck is it called? Memory Blip.
Okay.
That's like everything but that title is coming to my mind. What the heck is that movie called? The Sound of Music.
Right. Yeah.
But that's a good example of just being relaxed, not really worried about it, not getting stressed out, and then it'll come.
Yeah.
And if it hadn't come, there's something called the ugly sister effect. And so what was coming to mind, I remember I just said singing in the rain. And I was like, singing in the music? No. And then I was like, Julie Andrews, who's the actress, and like everything except for Sound of Music is coming. Right? And,
similar things.
And 16, is it 16 going on 17? I don't know, there's a song in there, I've never memorized the song.
Right.
But nonetheless, everything except for what I was looking for comes into my mind.
Right.
And that's called the ugly sister effect. Because the prince is looking for Cinderella, knocking on the door, give me the beautiful one, the one I want, and then all the ugly sisters keep coming. Right. And then another ugly sister comes, and another ugly sister comes, like, no, give me Cinderella. So they call that in memory science, the ugly sister effect. When you get any thought, except for the one you're looking for.
Right.
And so you just wait, let time do its work, it'll come back to you.
To be honest, I don't think I have that problem so much. I just have the problem of no sisters at all, no siblings.
Oh, no sisters, no
it's
sisters,
an empty room.
Well, that's not my experience in talking with you. There always seems to be something to say.
I guess so. So we should talk about why we're filming today.
Why are we?
Well, because I had a chat with you, was it last week?
Yeah.
And I thought it was really interesting. There's a lot of awesome stuff in your mind. It's really cool to listen to. And I thought, I want to hear it again because it's like, it's a bit too much to absorb in one sitting. So, and I thought maybe, maybe other people would like to listen as well. So.
All right, well.
And I feel like I'm taking on kind of the Joe Rogan role.
Okay.
Like, are you a fan at all?
Yeah.
Yeah? He's not particularly knowledgeable about many things, but...
Oh, I don't know, he seems to be.
Yeah, maybe. But I don't know, he does seem to sort of ask a lot of... sometimes they seem like pretty dumb questions, but I don't know, it seems to make him a really good interviewer.
Yeah, well, to tell you the truth, I've only ever watched outtakes on YouTube of his podcast, but I was a big fan of News Radio. Right, which he was on, wasn't he?
Never heard of that.
No? So I'm pretty sure Joe Rogan was the actor. Was it News Radio it was called?
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was called News Radio.
Right.
And it had a Canadian actor from Kids in the Hall. Dave, his name will come to me. Now in this case, I'm not getting an ugly sister effect, but I can't figure out what his last name is at the moment. But
you're in an empty room.
Anyway, Kids in the Hall.
Okay.
And he... was in that, and just some phenomenal actors. Phil Hartman was in it.
Okay.
Remember him from Saturday Night Live?
Nope.
No? Oh, okay, so anyway, but I'm pretty sure it was Joe Rogan, and he was like the janitor.
Okay, so this was a comedy sketch?
Yeah, it was a half-hour, sitcom. Sitcom that took place at a radio station.
Okay.
David Foley, that was his name.
Okay.
Dave Foley. And yeah, if you don't know the Kids in the Hall, you got to check out the Kids in the Hall. Speaking of Daves, because there's this great song that they sing in there. These are the Daves I know, these are the Daves I know. Some of them are Davids and others are just Daves. They all have two hands. They come from different months. Something like this. It's like really funny. Bruce McCullough sings it.
All right. Is that Saturday Night Live?
Well, here's the thing. The guy who created Saturday Night Live, whose name is now, I'm getting an ugly sister effect, left, right, and center, but it'll come to me. He's a Canadian who created Saturday Night Live, and he was in Toronto, and he saw these kids doing the Kids in the Hall shtick at a Toronto comedy club, and so he sort of made it. He helped them with their career anyway to make a show in Canada called Kids in the Hall.
Right.
And it is Lorne Green, I think his name is. No, Lorne Green's not right. It's Lorne something.
Okay.
But Lorne Green, I think, is another Canadian influence. He's really huge, and so Saturday Night Live is actually a Canadian production. at its heart.
Right.
Or at least the producer.
I haven't watched an awful lot of it, to be honest.
Lorne Michaels. That's what his name is. Lorne Michaels.
Cool.
See, now this is the thing too that's interesting about memory, right? It's like Lorne Green. No, wait a second. That's that old dude who was in Bonanza, I think. But you know, like there's just this endless chain. And
right.
you can get your way back to things. When you're using memory techniques, that's often what you do. Is you just try and figure out just the smallest hook. So I didn't get Lorne Michaels the first time, but I got a Lorne, and then I know that's not right, and then I keep, and I'm talking to you, I'm just not stop, and I'm processing this and figuring it out. It's like Rubik's Cube in your head. It's so much fun.
Can you do a Rubik's?
Okay. What does it mean to do a Rubik's?
Solve it.
No, I can't.
My brother can do it. It's pretty impressive.
I've never been attracted to boxes outside of Hellraiser movies.
You lost me with the reference.
You never seen Hellraiser?
No.
Oh man. Well, Hellraiser has the secret keys to reality.
Okay.
You gotta watch Hellraiser.
All right.
Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2
okay.
are probably two of the most amazing films in cinematic history.
Are we talking 80s or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clive Barker.
Okay.
And basically, it's kind of, imagine if David Cronenberg directed the Matrix, right? So there's this box, I think it's called a lament cube.
Yep.
And basically, in the world, there are humans, and in this otherworldly place, there are Cenobites. And the Cenobites, I don't know, man, like it's just, it's one of those things where you create your own sort of idea of what's going on there.
In the movie.
In the movie, but
it's interpretive.
There's just two worlds, and there's a box, and if you can solve the box, you will experience the place where pleasure and pain meet, and then the Cenobites from the other world will come and get you, basically. And anyway, whatever. It's like just a great story.
All right. What does it mean to lament? Is that sort of pondering something? Is that what lament is?
Yeah, lamentation. And it often is sorrowful.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. I lament that I was lamenting that I didn't remember Lorne Michaels, and I came up with Lorne Green instead.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
I just kept thinking of what's his name? Lauren Malvo from the bad guy in Fargo.
Fargo. Oh wow, I haven't seen that forever. Right. That's Coen Brothers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, okay, Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And yeah, you guys share a certain look.
I don't think so.
No, but I like Joe Rogan, and I think
where he's got muscle, I've got fat.
Oh.
And where I've got hair, he's got nothing. So.
In any case, he's a cool cat and really smart guy. And the thing.
But I think the thing is, he's really interested.
Yeah.
So yeah. Even in topics he's not necessarily that knowledgeable on. He's yeah. So
well. Okay.
Now,
where do we go from there?
Well, what did I ask you about last time? I asked you about Nietzsche.
Nietzsche.
Because I've been listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
And he brings up characters like Nietzsche a lot.
Yeah.
And I think I'd be able to understand what he's talking about a bit better if I knew who these people were and what they were all about.
Right.
So I heard Nietzsche was mentioned on a different podcast recently. I forget which one. And they're sort of saying he was viewed as a bit, maybe a bit anti-Christianity, kind of.
Maybe.
No?
Well, yes and no, though.
Right.
I think the better way to describe it is, well, look.
Perhaps a bit anti-supernatural, or?
Certainly, he would push for one to test the assumption of one's claims scientifically.
Yep.
So there's a book he wrote that's called The Gay Science, which actually is in German. It's Fröhliche Wissenheit or Wissenschaft. Die Fröhliche.
That's right, and he was German, right?
Yes.
And you were saying there were some problems with translation.
Yeah. So the gay science doesn't quite hit it.
Okay.
It's kind of like the science of happiness, or happy science, or something like this.
Back in a time when gay meant happy.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm happy with the gay science. Call it whatever you like.
Yeah.
But the point is it's very important that he uses the word science, right? Because the issue with Nietzsche and what one would perceive as a hatred of Christianity or a suspicion of Christianity is actually not. It's a scientific skepticism of the basis by which a tradition makes its claims.
Okay.
Right? And so he was very interested in what happens when you trace the genealogy of these claims and do it scientifically, skeptically. And what it turns out, and this is my understanding of what Nietzsche discovers here, which is on the page in the Bible itself for anybody who wants to read it, is that a lot of what happened has to do with what, and I don't think Nietzsche came up with this term himself originally. I think, or it certainly is also in Hegel anyway.
In Hegel?
Hegel, yeah. He's another German philosopher. Slave morality, right? And so I don't think that Nietzsche hates Christianity as much as he hates slave morality as a behavior that enables weak people to lord over the strong. And that is a repulsive activity that is very common in humanity that has less to do with religion or Christianity than it does with the weakness of certain humans that Nietzsche despised. I can make this a little bit clearer, but ask the question.
What do you mean by weak people?
Okay, so this is where the evidence is in the Bible itself, right?
Okay.
So the Bible, let's just take the story of Moses, right? And the Hebrew slaves, right? So how did the slaves deal with their repression? They say, God's gonna get you, right? And if you actually look at the history of the Bible, right? The history of the Bible is that the Hebrews were slaves of other cultures, right? And it actually says in the Bible, and all that sort of stuff. What that actually means is not in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. It means in a beginning, a supreme being created a heaven and a earth. In other words, there were multiples. And we know that there were multiples because Elohim, which means a supreme being, in the very next sentence, Ruach, who's another God, is the God that comes out over the water. And then there's Adonai, and there's Jehovah, and there's yada yada. And then there's the Tetragrammaton, which is, I think, Adonai and Jehovah. I mean, no, I'm missing one. But
so is this Jewish writings?
That's right. And that's the Bible that we have to this day. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Right.
But it actually says, in a beginning, a supreme being created a heaven and an earth. And then another God appears, then another God appears, then another God appears. And what happened is the Hebrews had their texts, their stories, and all that jazz. And
that was really the precursor to Christianity, wasn't it?
Sure, that tradition.
Yep.
But we're far from Christianity. We're still in ancient Hebrew stuff here, right? They're oppressed by other cultures. They're enslaved by other cultures. And what is their survival tool? We better build a better God, right? Because our multiple gods here, they're not scaring the hell out of our oppressors. So we consolidate our gods into one God, Jehovah.
So they were a bit more paganistic, like they had the sun god and that sort of thing. Is that?
Well, I mean, I'm not a Christian or a Hebrew scholar.
Sure.
But the idea here is to answer the question of why that's a weakness in humanity.
Yes.
Is because if you look at what the Old Testament is, outside of the Tanakh, or even inside the Tanakh, which is part of the Bible now, like the first 5 books, I think.
Like Old Testament or something?
Yeah. It's a series of letters written to scare the hell out of the oppressors. They're war letters. It's war correspondence. Our God is going to do this to you. A lot of it, not all of it. Because there's genres in the Bible. There's stories, there's laws, there's letters of war, etc. But you see historically, you see the genealogy, you see the story of building a better God, a scarier God, right?
Right.
And so that is slave morality. Because the slave, he's not saying, hey, Pharaoh, you're bad and you're going to be punished by my God because you're really bad. It's just because you're the stronger aristocratic element in society that has power over our tribe. So we need to then create suffering for you. Now this is before the concept of hell, right?
Yep.
there's a Hebrew concept of hell. Christianity borrows hell from the Greeks and all this sort of stuff later. And that's where slave morality really takes off. But it's there already in the Hebrew tradition, and it is instead of Hebrews or whoever coming together and being like, let's build better weapons and kill those jerks, because they're punks and we don't like them. We'll just write some letters and make a scary God, right? And then you're going to suffer eternal torment. It's eventually
But that wouldn't work on its own, surely. Just the writings.
Oh, they sure gave it the good old college try, didn't they? They still are. I just got the guy's name is Cyril. He emailed me this morning. There's a series of emails I've received from some dude named Cyril, who's warning me. Some guy on the internet who found my website warning me that I'm going to go to hell and I'm going to burn eternally because I don't accept his beliefs. Okay. This guy is a slave to stupidity, a slave to mythology, and someone who is somehow getting his kicks out of, whatever he sees in me, trying to punish me symbolically through what Nietzsche would call slave morality.
Right. So is that kind of similar to, I think I've heard every now and then some sort of church-going people sort of saying, like, I'm a slave to God and I'm happy to be a slave. Is that kind of, I forget the context of the conversations this came up in. It was in some debates, I think with Sam Harris type debates. I'll have to look them up again so I can.
Yeah, well, I mean, people can use that word slave in their things. Certainly, in the Islamic tradition, there's a sense of submission and slavery, and this is dramatic theater, right? Oh, I'm a slave to the Lord and whatever. I mean, I grew up in church. I know the jazz. I can speak in tongues anytime. All that stuff. I know it inside and out to a certain degree. But the problem is there's so many versions of Christianity that it doesn't cohere into anything.
Right.
But they share, many of them, one thing in common, which is that they're certain that they're right. And that's a very dangerous position to be in, especially when the thing that you're certain about, you don't know the languages that these texts were written in, you don't know how they were changed over time, you don't know how that they continue to be changed in the present moment to suit the interests of power, and how exactly they are lorded over other people in a myriad of ways that is pandering to the weakest part of humanity. And this is what Nietzsche hated. But Nietzsche says, he says very, very clearly, in a very unclear way, which is part of Nietzsche's problem. Okay. So, this is my interpretation, and an interpretation that many talk about. He says in Also Sprach Zarathustra, or Also Spoke Zarathustra, this other book, he says that God is dead, right?
Yeah.
That's not what he means, though. He's not really making the proclamation that God is dead, because probably there was no God to die in the first place. But rather what he's saying is, if this is the way you're going to worship your God, he may as well be dead. Because any God worth worshiping wouldn't accept this pathetic behavior that humans are going around casting threats of hell for eternity on people when you don't even know that this is so, and you can't demonstrate it because you don't have any kind of science at all that would demonstrate this.
So, with what you're talking about, and you when you say this slave mentality, are you kind of saying taking the scriptures or whatever as unchallengeable and sort of submitting to that worldview and
and it's because it gives the person doing it power, right? It's like another philosopher who's very instructive here, and he's dead, but he's very influenced by the Nietzschean tradition of genealogy and skepticism of the past. His name's Michel Foucault, and he said that power is really the ability to conduct the conduct of others, right? So even if you're poor, you're the monk, you're the preacher, the street preacher out on the street, if you can cast fear into someone to the extent that it conducts or causes them to conduct their own behavior according to your whim,
that's power.
That's power. And that person is the slave in society as opposed to the aristocracy, right? So Nietzsche's talking very specifically about the hatred of the aristocracy, which means the people who are in control, the people who are rich, the people who are in control of the worldly things that we have here today.
Aristocrats, they're always the people at the top? Is that?
Well, I mean, aristocracy just is a word to use for, you know, the...
It's like the rich, snobby...
Well, yeah. In other words, let's just say successful people.
Okay.
Right? And in different periods of history, those would be different kinds of people. Like today, Joe Rogan has a podcast. He's essentially part of the aristocracy. Right? So it's not snobby necessarily. And
Okay.
it never necessarily was. Like if you think of people like Benjamin Franklin and so forth, like I don't know. I never met him, but I don't imagine him to be a snob.
Well, I was just thinking it has that... it has that meaning to me, but I'm not sure that's exactly.
I'm just falling back on my academic training and Nietzsche, like the actual language there, aristocracy. But yeah, it just means slave morality is any time, and it doesn't have to have a religious context, but it's any time when you have a hatred of success and you try to harm success because of that hatred, or that fear, or that suspicion that you have of people who are more successful than you are. And you behave in such a way as to damage that rather than support it out of jealousy, out of lack, out of whatever may be motivating that.
Well, I still got to say it's kind of confusing me a little bit that you're talking about the preacher or whoever as having the power over the people,
right,
or whoever they influence, but then you're still calling them the slave.
Well,
how can you be slave and in control of others at the same time?
Well, that's how slave morality works, right? You become the master. I think that's how.
So they're the master. Everyone else is the slave. So, okay.
You can think of it too with even politicians, right?
Yep.
So in that case, they might get paid a decent wage, right? But they're still in this sort of, they're a slave to now other amounts of, or other elements and aspects of society, like big corporate interests, for example, right?
Yep.
If they're sort of in this spot where they have to lord over a kind of morality to explain their decisions and hide the dirt behind it, right?
Yep.
And so it's not the same thing, but it's similar, it's related. And they will use a kind of morality in order to do it, right? And they will lack a kind of morality as part of doing it. But I wouldn't get caught up in the word slave. It's just it's just someone in a position of weakness who is trying to inflate their power, and they're doing it in a way that doesn't even have any evidence behind it, right? And this is the thing that Nietzsche is worried about. But if someone just had the wherewithal, you know, to say, well, look, I'm not a believer in this, that, or the other thing, but I have the sense of God or whatever, and that's just me, and you create your own demonstration of evidence for why you believe that, and you don't cause punishment or harm to other people psychologically or whatever, then yeah, great. Because Nietzsche, again, would say, if God existed, he may as well be dead if these are the ways you're going to worship such a creature or such an entity.
Cool.
And that's the real meaning of God is dead in Nietzsche.
Right. And so I was asking about Nietzsche last time we spoke because you said you described something as being Nietzschean, or a way of talking as being Nietzschean.
Yes.
So
we're all Nietzschean.
Is Nietzschean to be thinking scientifically and backing up your, I don't know, your beliefs? Or
well, I mean, is it Nietzschean? It doesn't have to be Nietzschean. I think many of us are deeply influenced by it in ways that we don't know.
Influenced by what?
By the tradition that he started, which is a tradition of skeptical thinking. And I shouldn't say he started it. I mean, he was influenced by Schopenhauer. He was influenced by the Bible. He was influenced by Plato and Aristotle and all kinds of people. So it's not like he started it, but
they say that sort of rational thinking sort of started with like the Greeks and that, didn't they? Like,
there are many starts. There are many places in the world where things start. And rationality, some people argue, and I think they have good evidence for it, that rationality is a construct. Rationality, there's many kinds of rationality, multiple ways to think about rationality. So to say that it came from the Greeks would be to talk about the Western tradition.
Yeah.
But there's older traditions.
But I just mean, I think that's people attribute that time to when people first started having really deep thoughts about, I don't know.
Well, comes back, yeah, that's interesting. It comes back to the aristocracy, really. But just to flag this,
Nice.
one thing that's important to note about Schopenhauer and the origins of rationality and so forth is that part of this thing where I'm saying like the Nietzschean tradition or this skeptical tradition starting at this moment is that actually we know that Schopenhauer knew about like the Upanishads and the Indian traditions, which are much older.
Okay.
And so there's texts in which a process of self-inquiry is described called
Buddhism
Vedanta.
or Buddhist type.
Buddhism comes from that as well,
Right.
but the origin is even earlier.
Yeah.
Right? And so Nietzsche is in a historical moment where some of those Eastern traditions are starting to enter the West.
Right.
And so that deep skepticism owes a lot to that introduction there. Some people think that Edmund Burke actually went, was it Burke? I think it was Edmund Burke, but it might be a different guy that I'm thinking of. Ugly Sisters. Went down to Italy and met a Jesuit priest who had gone to India and came back. And that may have been the origins of how Schopenhauer got hold of some of these Eastern texts in the first place. I don't know, it's like a big, long, twisted story. The point being is that that was so fun. Like what Nietzsche was able to introduce is he was very, very popular at a moment when books could be reproduced and transported a lot more readily.
Right.
And he was talking about this stuff. And
so there could have been stuff going on a long time before that, just couldn't get the word out.
Right. Like the Industrial Revolution was massive for the transmission of information in ways that we don't quite understand because of our media infrastructures from at least, like, say, the 50s and the 60s. But the point being, and it's an important one, is that critical thinking of this caliber predates the Western tradition by a long time. Right? And so the Greeks, they found, perhaps independently, perhaps not, because they're not that far from India. Like, people were walking around. Who knows? And I mean,
who knows what's been lost along the way, I guess.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people think that Islam preserved all this stuff, but actually, like during the so-called Dark Ages, which it's kind of suspect that there ever was a Dark Ages as such, but...
you have to tell me more about that later.
Yeah. Well,
maybe next time.
I think the true story is, or apparently, I have read, they didn't preserve it. They enslaved Europeans to preserve it, and that's how it got done. But in any case, the whole thing is that the Greek tradition is a wonderful, beautiful thing, and Nietzsche loved it, and he understood it very, very well. He was a philologist, and he studied the origins of words. And he took them very seriously, which ended up influencing a lot of people after him, like Heidegger and Derrida and so on, who also took words very, very seriously. And out of genealogy comes what Jacques Derrida came to call deconstruction, or deconstructionism. And a lot of people have misunderstood that, because they think that he's taking things apart. Right? But really what he's doing is he's using the tools of genealogy to show that they were never together in the first place, at least not in the way that we think, and to show the history by which we have, as a society and multiple societies, constructed the illusion of concepts, ideas, institutions that aren't really there at all, and never were, right? Like Christianity, for example, is not what people think in their heads it is. Right?
Well, it was interesting. I was talking to Vic. I sent you a photo just before, and he was talking to me about how something to do with, he was watching a show called Sapiens, listening to an audio book, and it was talking about how we're the only species that really creates fiction. And he was saying not just fictional writings, but like the fact that we run a business, like the business is it's a fictional entity, right?
Sure.
It's all fictional. It's just
everything is
not really.
It's all created. It's manufactured. And then everything has a history, right? Like one of the funnest things you can do is go and look at old advertising, right? You know, of companies that still exist. Like you can see that they are building themselves all the time as they go along. And like the McDonald's advertising in Australia is hilarious, right? Like it's a different McDonald's than in other places of the world, and I'm sure it has its own.
I think it's hilarious
history.
right now.
Yeah. But it's especially hilarious when I think in my mind how McDonald's used to be presented on television. Right? Like I don't know how it was here in Australia, but when I was a kid, it was like Ronald McDonald running around all the time, and the Hamburglar, and
because you grew up in Canada, right?
Yeah. And like it's just this weird cartoon world all the time.
Well, we had the cartoons. We had the Hamburglar and what was it, Grimace?
Grimace, yeah.
And there was a bird, I think, or
yeah, something like this.
Yeah, but that's around the days they always had the kids' parties at the Maccas.
Yeah, well, Maccas, we never used that term here.
Really?
So, I mean, in Canada, you have it here. But,
don't use it at all?
No.
What do you say? McDonald's? So many syllables. What's that, 3 syllables?
Well, you know, we've got bigger mouths in Canada. But, you know, it's an invention that is always changing. There's no fixed institution called McDonald's. Right? It's a boat in an ocean that is constantly changing itself, and ultimately it creates multiple boats. And then sometimes those boats develop helicopters that fly from each other, and they have landing pads and ports all over the world. And it's just like, it's an invention that is constantly reinventing itself. As with any religion, as with any school of thought, as with any band. You know, I was just watching a thing with Marty Friedman today from Megadeth, why he wouldn't rejoin Megadeth. And you know, they're talking like Megadeth as if Megadeth is this eternal essence. Right? Well, but it's not. It's a construction. It's a story.
Yeah, well, Dave Mustaine, he's always looking for new band members. He's always... I know he grabbed a drummer from Lamb of God for a while, didn't he?
I think that's true. Yeah, I think I saw them when they had the Lamb of God guy.
Yeah. So I think that band's. I think he's the central guy, and I think the rest of the band is always evolving.
Yeah.
Like, are you a fan of the Eels at all?
The Eels.
Yeah, you ever heard of them? I think they're American.
I don't think so. But
anyway, I've seen them a few times at the Tivoli, and every time I've seen them, it's the main guy. What's his name? Mark Everett, I think his name is. Anyway, it was always him, but the other band members were always different every time.
Right. Yeah.
Apparently that's because he was really not easy to get along with.
Did you ever see This Is Spinal Tap?
I've heard of a band called Spinal Tap.
Well, there is no band called Spinal Tap.
I think there is. I think there's a Brisbane band called Spinal Tap.
A Brisbane band called Spinal Tap? Well, they're...
Like a heavy metal band. Or death metal.
If there is, I need to see this. But This Is Spinal Tap is a...
Oh, no, you told me about that movie.
Did I?
Last time we talked, you were telling me I have to watch it.
Oh, okay.
I forget why.
I don't remember, but...
Remind me, because I've forgotten.
That's a mockumentary. I think Rob Reiner put it together.
That's right.
And it's just about a band that doesn't exist. But then the thing is over the years, they made an album many years later called, I think it's called Break Like the Wind.
Okay.
Right? And now it's like, well, are they a band or aren't they? Right? Because there was it was a fiction. Right?
Yeah.
And I believe they wrote all the music. Like Michael McKean was in it.
As in that album was what they were making during the mockumentary?
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, it had this song, Big Bottom, talk about bum cakes, my lady's got them, or something like this, right? Like really vile. I think the album in the movie was called Smell the Glove or something like this. And they had the song Stonehenge also.
Right.
Totally retarded. But it's funny, right?
Right.
And it's just hilarious. Nigel, the guitar player, I think, is one of the characters, and he has this amplifier that says turn it. It has 11, you know. And they're like, yeah, but you just put your amplifier. You just put the number 11 there. It doesn't really turn up to 11. And he's like, no, it actually does. Anyway, it's like a hilarious movie. Okay. But they went on to make an actual album, which I believe is called Break Like the Wind, which is also just this joke, right? But it's really good music. Like it's insanely well written.
Right. Yeah, because you're telling me to listen to it because I like a lot of heavy metal stuff. So.
Right. I don't remember this conversation.
Okay, we had it. I didn't dream it.
Amazing. Amazing. I like conversations I don't remember having.
Especially
it could have been that we had it, just not last time.
Right. Maybe, yeah, I don't know.
In any case, does that answer your question about Nietzsche?
Oh, gee, I think so.
You just got to read Nietzsche, dive in.
Okay.
He's a wild cat.
All right. Well, I did want to ask then, is there anything you disagree with that he wrote about? Any of his thoughts?
That I disagree with Nietzsche?
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. I mentioned Foucault earlier. Foucault wrote a really interesting article, like an essay called "What is an Author?" And in it, he's using Freud and Karl Marx as examples.
Yep.
And he says it's not about whether they're right or wrong, or you agree or disagree with them. They are opening discourses. They are opening discussion. They're opening dialogue. So, and of course Nietzsche has that famous beyond good or evil, right? Or beyond good and evil. And the idea there is you develop discernment as a philosopher to the extent that you don't really have opinions about things. You're just rather working on evidence. And so Nietzsche what would it matter if I agree or disagree with something? It's just a question of, is it opening thoughts and ideas that allow me to create better evidence that supports claims?
Okay.
That's the gay science, right? Or the joyful science. I'd rather call it the joyful science. That's where you get joy, is when you no longer have likes or dislikes, but rather you just have a wonderful connection to higher levels of critical thinking that enable you to cut like a knife through the junk
and just go wherever it takes you.
Yeah, and enjoy the bad stuff too, right?
Yeah.
Because Nietzsche's, it's not a question of agree or disagree. It's just a question of what's useful, and that's what Nietzsche, I think, would say one should find, and one should live in such a way, and this is what we talked about last time with the myth of the eternal return. Live in such a way that you would be gladly doomed to relive that day again and again and again for all eternity, right? Because you're so aligned with not your likes or dislikes, but the truth and the joyful science and the joy that joyful science brings. It's very simple, even though it's got a lot of complex sentences and weird book titles.
It sounds very simple, but I'm having trouble getting my mind around it still.
Well, yeah, I think that if you were to really lock it down, all of philosophy is boiled down to two sorts of things. The first is, do essences exist or not, right? And
essences.
How can you make it so that you live in such a way that you don't sweat the small stuff? That's it.
That'd be nice.
That's all it is.
What are essences?
Essences. So, essentialism wants to say that there are things that are pure and true and eternal.
Yep.
Like justice. And something that's original and pure in its originalness.
Not just a human construct, like.
Right. So, justice, I think, is probably one of the best ones. Truth, maybe, is another one. Morality, right? But we know, actually, that there are multiple forms of truth and multiple forms of reality because they're constructed by humans. In the same way that the story of McDonald's or the story of Eel, did you say was the name of the band?
The Eels.
The Eels. The story of Spinal Tap or whatever. It's just constructed, right? It's constructed. And that doesn't mean that there aren't things that are truer than others, right? Some things are more true than other things. But the whole notion of truth itself is subject to change based on the utterance and the moment in which you are naming the truth.
You know what? I think that should be a good topic for next time because it's kind of a hot topic right now. Like since you had the Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson debate, like what is truth?
Right.
You know, because Jordan Peterson really takes the angle of truth is it beneficial to your survival? That's what defines truth.
Yeah, well, we should dive in on there because that's where Sam Harris and his insistence on certain things become very interesting because I don't see in my mind how that he can't see some of the things that are so clearly in evidence that he himself needs in order to have the consistent statement of truth that he makes.
I really like his way of thinking and I struggle to deviate from it, to be honest. But
I do too.
Yeah.
The only problem is that he is just inconsistent enough to be the demonstration of Jordan Peterson's point. That would be my claim.
We should definitely talk about that sometime.
Are you a subscriber to Sam Harris?
Like his podcast?
Well, to the paid
his
stuff.
way of thinking. No, but I am actually about to be.
Right. Because he just released a new one where he's talking about like how could you, like a private one.
Right.
And I haven't listened to it yet, but I have access to all that jazz because I'm a supporter.
Yeah, right. No, I want to.
But there's one on like how do you know if someone's really enlightened, and I'm really excited to listen to that.
Yeah, okay. Cause actually, cool. Yeah, I am going to sign up to him because I'm missing a lot of his podcasts.
Yeah, the AMAs, the private AMAs, they're awesome.
It's making me sad.
They're really good.
And he deserves it anyway because it's really good to listen to. But you were talking to me once about a lady you met. I think you said she worked in the government or something.
Yes.
And you were saying the instant you met her,
yes.
she just you could tell she was so. Did you say enlightened? I think.
Well, I may have used that word. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're enlightened also.
Oh, you reckon?
Yes, I know so. I know it as clear as I know all the things that I know.
Okay.
How could you be anything other than enlightened?
Is everyone enlightened?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Everybody is pure consciousness.
Yes.
Right? How could you be anything other than pure consciousness?
Because some people are. You can either be going along for the ride wherever your emotions take you, and you know, unconsciously, you know, I'm hungry, I'm going to go eat. I'm bored, I'm going to go play Xbox. Without ever stopping to, I don't know, think about just the difference between your thoughts coming and just, you know, on autopilot,
right?
You know, as opposed to, you know, actually thinking about what is going on in your mind and.
Yeah.
And so enlightenment to me, I always imagine it as being that state of like meditative thinking where, I don't know, you're constantly aware of, your mind is never out of control. It's always, I don't know.
Yeah, that's contrary to reality.
Yeah.
Right?
Because they talk about, they talk about the Buddha, right? He was meant to be this amazingly enlightened person.
Yeah, but I never met him. Did you?
No.
No. And he was, okay, so Alan Watts, I think the book is called Out of Mind.
Yeah.
He goes into what exactly this Buddha dude was all about. And the word Buddhi Buddha comes from the word booty. And there are many booties, and that just means like one booty who's a little bit more switched on than others.
Okay.
Perhaps. Because, okay, so this is pretty complex, and it gets to the nature of truth and all that sort of stuff.
Okay.
Because there is an eternal truth. And that eternal truth is happening right now. And you are as enlightened as you're ever going to get right now, as am I. There's no other potential conclusion. And this is where Sam Harris is a great teacher of this, right?
Okay.
Because of the free will debate, right?
Yeah.
So what's playing out right now, in this moment, is enlightenment, right? And the reason why that this nonsense about like constantly being switched on can never be real is because everything that comes into awareness will leave awareness, right? Even the awareness of awareness itself must end.
You can't hold on to
it. You can't hold on to it.
But, so what about like, I think I've heard people talking about that the Buddha was, is that what you call him, the Buddha?
I never met the dude.
It was like he...
And if I did, I think you're supposed to kill him.
Cause don't they talk about when you're meditating? It's like you're conscious, like you become one with your body. Like it's not like you're a separate.
But when are you not one with your body?
Well, I don't know. Isn't that the
you're
state
one
of
with all things right now?
Isn't that okay?
How could you not be?
Because you're separate thinking.
Where is the separation?
Show it here somewhere. I don't know.
Well, but where is there?
I don't know. It feels like it's up in here. You know.
Well, then the answer is, and I'm sure if there was a Buddha, he would say, ask where it is.
Yep.
And whenever you have any questions, ask to whom is this happening and to where is it happening. And this is how you find that place. And then you can extend it and stay with it longer and longer and longer. And yeah, it is happening somewhere here, right?
Yeah.
And there are brain scans that can show it to you, right? But here's the problem with all the brain scans. We don't need them, and we never did, right? Because you are the one who can perceive the brain scans and no one else, right? You are the one who can perceive all these things that are happening right now and only now.
Yep.
Because if you come to it later, it will be now, right? And if you had an inkling of it in the past, it will have been then. And if you remember it then, you'll experience it now, right? It's just now. And to surrender and to let go and to be able to just really gel with that experience is a problem for the definition of enlightenment, because you always already were in that state.
You have no choice.
You have no choice, because there's no free will,
Yeah.
right? There's no basis for free will to exist. And so it's luck that you would ever come across these ideas and the path that would lead you to realizing what you always already knew. You're just not paying attention.
Right.
It's a blind spot in many minds. And Sam Harris is a great person who helps erase the ignorance of what has always been true and always will be true and cannot be anything other than the truth, right? Which is that this is it.
I love what he says. He says, "It is always now." That's one of my favorite Sam Harris quotes.
How could it be anything other than that?
Yeah.
That's the most exciting thing. And when you get that, that's enlightenment. James Swartz says, if you think you're enlightened, you should hang your head in shame. What took you so long? Right?
And Anthony says, "You were always enlightened."
Well, and it's funny because when I started to really, like, there's a guy here from Brisbane named Ben Michel who has a website called Project Monkey Mind. And we were talking coffee chat like this. We should have recorded it, but we were having a coffee chat like this, and I was telling him
good practice for you.
my skepticism. Yeah, practice. Practice makes progress. But I was telling him my skepticism about enlightenment and all this stuff, and like my own meditation practice. I never try to clear my mind because I just sit just to sit, and I do some breathing stuff and so forth. But I don't. It's like the Alan Watts thing. Why would you need to have no mind when there are plenty of rocks around? They don't have any mind, but you have a mind. You have the most perfect mind you could ever have. So enjoy the ride, right? And just enjoy those thoughts that are coming and work with what you got and that sort of stuff. But he said, look, you got to read Gary Weber, Happiness Beyond Thought, because his argument is that there are all these descriptions of enlightenment, which is actually just bliss, the feeling of bliss and oneness with the world.
Being confused with enlightenment.
Well, just a non-separation, a non-duality, as it's called, right?
See, that's what I always thought enlightenment was meant to be.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean no thought, right?
Right.
It just means understanding that you are the world.
Yeah.
You are awareness. You must be, because you're the only awareness that can be, right?
So to me,
it's so simple.
Yeah, but I kind of imagined it as like maximum thought. Like right now,
That's it's happening right now.
Yeah, but like right now, I'm not simultaneously aware of the sensation in my feet and in my hands and in my back, like all at once, you know? Like I'm locked off to all the sensation at once, you know? I've always imagined enlightenment to sort of be just experiencing everything.
Yeah, well, see, there's brain science behind this that will help you, and you've got to read Happiness Beyond Thought, because this is exactly what happened to me. Okay. So to cut a long story short, I just said, okay, Ben, I'm going to take the challenge, read this book, and see what happens. Do these fancy things that Gary Weber is talking about.
Okay.
Because I did a lot of, now arguably the meditation that I was doing actually locked me deeper in thought, because it was processes that were here in these functions, you know, the parietal,
chanting and that.
Yeah. So part of the thing is how can you get more of this action going on in this part of the brain? And so Gary Weber says, well, arguably, if you were to just strip it of the woo-woo, strip it of the spirituality, these guys might be onto something, because the chants that they're saying that evolved over thousands of years, right? Yeah. They might just, and even Sanskrit itself, may have evolved as it evolved, precisely because there might be a connection between the neural networks in the brain and the placement and the touching of the mouth and touching of the fingers and certain practices that they do. And I was like, holy crap, if that's right, let's play with it. Well, and then boom, all of a sudden I felt very different after a very short amount of practice. Right. And so that thing you're saying, you don't feel your whole body? Yeah. Not only do I feel my whole body in every moment, but I feel very aware that all of this is all just all one. Like it's just a oneness, right? And it's amazing feeling.
So that's saying I don't feel like I'm experiencing that right now.
Well, if you'd like to, I think it's probably something you could reproduce scientifically just by following similar steps. They might not be the exact same steps.
But so if you're saying I am already enlightened,
yes,
what is it that I'm lacking that you're experiencing that I'm not?
Well, first of all, you're lacking nothing. Okay. It's just that you may not have done the exercises that will help you see what is already apparent.
Right.
It's like, you know, the illusions where you have a vase that is also two faces?
Yeah.
Right? Or the old woman and the young woman?
Silhouette stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So you know how that once you have seen both sides of the illusion,
Can't unsee it.
you can't unsee it?
Yeah.
This is what happens with non-dual reality. Is that once you've experienced it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
And then you're just in. And people make the argument, I think they're right. Once you have enlightenment, it'll never go because you've had it, right? And it's very, very, and then this is what often happens. It happened to me as well. You go through what they often call a dark night of the soul. Because you know the Buddhists and all that, they talk about how it's all just nothing, nothingness, empty space, eternal, infinite, existence, or whatever, yada yada they talk about, which is not to discount it or dismiss it, but I felt that. And I went around for like almost a year, just totally disillusioned and just really weirded out. And they call that the dark night of the soul, and I came through it.
It's a long night.
It's a long night. And sometimes it comes back in little blips and so forth. But here's the thing. Everything that comes into awareness will leave awareness. So I spend most of my days like super blissed out, super blissful.
Yeah.
But I'm well aware that, you know, someone might bump into me on the street, or I don't know, some bodily function may come, and then I'm out of it.
Yeah.
And that is just the name of the game. And anyone who tells you otherwise and says, oh, there was some super Buddha who like managed to get through the entirety of their life, and like some people will say those dudes, those monks who burned themselves on fire, they didn't feel any pain because they were totally in it.
Yeah.
Give me a break. Like whether they felt.
I've watched the video. It looks like he's not in pain. What's that famous? Who was that?
That does not evidence that they somehow were super enlightened, and you know, whatever came into awareness leaves awareness. And where did that happen? Here's the ultimate thing that needs to be understood. Where did that burning of the monk's body happen? In your head. In the chemical bath of your head. And if you get into these exercises in self-inquiry, right? To whom are these thoughts happening? To whom are these experiences happening? Where are they happening, right? The only conclusion that you can ever honestly and ethically reach is that they're happening to you and nobody else.
Right.
And the you that I'm experiencing right now is happening in my head, right? Which isn't to say that you're not real. And you'll hear Harris talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that other people don't exist, but the only thing that you can be certain is that the appearance of those other people in your awareness are in your awareness.
No, he says that a lot. He says the only thing that we could ever possibly be sure of is that we are, that our experience, the matter of our experience is real. And like, and he says that's what we have to base everything on. We have to start somewhere. That's where we have to start. There's nowhere deeper to go.
And that's where empiricism is very exciting, of the Nietzschean kind that we were just talking about.
So would that be Nietzschean?
No, Nietzschean is just a word, right? it doesn't mean that it's Nietzschean, but Nietzsche would be very instructive here, which is why I don't know why Harris discounts him so easily, and I've actually heard him do the complete opposite.
I'm not sure I've heard him talk about him.
Well, he discounts Nietzsche pretty big in one of the two earlier podcasts with Jordan Peterson.
I'll have to go. I'm not sure I listened to all of them. I found them so frustrating, so I think I cut out.
I found them deeply fascinating, troubling, but fascinating. But at the end of the day, the whole thing is all I mean by Nietzschean, or why that I'm calling it back, is simply because these tools of skepticism that we find in Nietzsche are related to the tools of skepticism that Harris himself teaches for testing your awareness, right? And confirming that fact that there is no you. There is only the awareness of a you. And if you can get closer to that awareness and further away from the illusion that there is a stable you, you will be free. And that's ultimately what it is.
Right.
But the thing is you're already free of it. You're just not aware of it. And it's just a practice.
Good.
Yeah. And consciousness is everything. Nietzsche always said everything interprets, right? And this interprets no more or less than I do, or you do, right?
As far as we can tell.
Well, it's interpreting gravity, it's interpreting time, it's interpreting all the same forces of sunlight and all that stuff that my body is.
Yep.
And we all come from the same star matter, right? And it's being perceived by awareness through this unit, right?
Yep.
And that same star matter, right? The same material of electronic energy and electrons and neurons and all that stuff There's only you, no one else. And I'm appearing in your consciousness now, built from the same source material that is in all of us and in the wall.
Yes.
Like it's all interpreting, even if this isn't quote unquote interpreting it consciously in the same way that we think we are. We're telling ourselves a story that we're perceiving it consciously, but we're all the same stuff. And all humans are is awareness. Somehow matter has evolved this thing that can perceive itself. And that thing that is witnessing these words that I'm saying now is the same thing that's in you, right? And nothing else.
As far as we can tell.
Well, just test it for yourself. That's what self-inquiry would be, right? Is just testing if the things that I'm saying are true, right? And you do that through self-inquiry. And that's what this early stuff from the Upanishads and the Advaita Vedanta tradition is the science of consciousness, the science of discovering the truth of awareness and finding it in yourself so that you're able to sort, sift, and screen all the other noise and be more in the presence of the presence that's always already there. And it has been since you were born. And since you were born. And since you started to be socialized to have the language that you have, the ideas that you have, the beliefs that you have, the stories that you tell yourself, and the stories you tell others, to train them to believe the things about you that you believe about yourself. Which is why influence is a possibility, right? We can influence each other. We can influence ourselves to tell different stories about ourselves, and then influence others to tell those other stories about ourselves, which is why truth is part of survival. Because the truth that one crafts by living life in the ways that one lives make or break bliss and happiness and fulfillment.
Necessarily, or as sort of a default state of being not?
I'm not sure that it's necessarily or default, but there's no free will, right? So it's luck, it's chance. A lot of it is luck and chance, you know?
Yeah.
It's why the people who are successful on things like YouTube are successful, is because it's a numbers game in all things. The more you create, it's like planting trees in a forest, right? Same thing with like business and advertising. The more that's out there, the more likely people are going to run into the trees in your forest and notice you, right? And so the more you practice meditation, well then the more likely you are to have those glimpses into what's really going on, right? And the more you study, the more likely you are for things to open up in your brain, right? And then you'll just realize what was always already true that you just weren't aware of.
I've had that a lot, I guess, even with my studies, which was more like multimedia type stuff. I've had a lot of moments where just couldn't grasp the concept I was learning, and then just one day it clicked, and I don't know, everything just falls together. And
there you go. Well, speaking of things falling together,
all right,
let's call this one a wrap.
I think so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was amazing.
That was good.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. So
I'll have a listen again and try to process it all.
Yeah, well, you know, it was a little bit meandering, but that's what conversation is all about.
Yeah, that's some interesting conversations, I think.
Thank you for suggesting it. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, man.